If we simply focus on work and life, we will always get it wrong. And that's a really strong statement, but I'm really happy to put myself behind it. And I think the two other variables that are so important to manage within this equation is self-care and career. If you don't get them right, they are like the hidden iceberg that start to kind of sabotage what happens to you at work and what happens to you in your family.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. This is your host Neha at leaderinterview.
peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Awards that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel, which receives more than 400,000 visitors a year, and we publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month.
We have with us today Magdalena Bak-Maier. She helps individuals and companies discover the power of connecting hearts and minds. She integrates neuroscience, positive psychology 2.0 with her original productivity models and the grid work-life balance tool she's developed so they can achieve results in harmony with life. Having 20 years of experience in talent development, she's privileged to be the trusted advisor to field pioneers in engineering, medicine, science, and more recently, social scientists. She founded Make Time Count Limited to empower people to bring heart and soul to life and work. She does this for the sake of human empowerment, productivity they can sustain, greater levels of health and well-being, connection that powers effective teamwork and collaboration, and ultimately a better world. We're so thrilled to have Magdalena join us today for an interview. Welcome to peopleHum, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Neha, for having me.
Thank you. The pleasure's all ours. So just to jump right into the interview, the first question that I want to ask you is that you're the founder and director at Make Time Count Limited for over a decade now. So that's very impressive. We'd love to hear more about it.
Well, Make Time Count is dedicated to supporting individuals and organizations that are interested in taking a human-centered approach to development and growth. So we are focusing on activity that can be sustained. So we're very interested in productivity with well-being and with relational health. And we believe that this is, in our view, something that supports the individual, but then also supports their system context in families and in their workplace, and therefore creates a better world. So that is very much the mission we're on.
Sounds very interesting. And I believe the name Make Time Count must have been inspired by your thought process to maybe be more productive or use resources better, I'm guessing.
It's a valid guess you're making, but in fact, Make Time Count was inspired by my family history and by my grandfather. And it had to do with a wisdom he told me when I was a kid, which is that you should be living for today and enjoy the day very much, but living knowing that you might live for a long time. So it had this wisdom to our life about making the most of the moment. So that's the Make Time Count, is that it kind of really combines the best of sort of our spiritual ways of being, also our responsibility in the world, with this idea impact, being productive, but not being necessarily just someone who's very busy and who does a lot, Yeah.
That's a wonderful thought. And I can only imagine that, a company that's based on a wonderful thought such as that can do wonders. So congratulations for the success of your organization. That sounds absolutely wonderful. So moving on to the next question, Magdalena, you integrate neuroscience and positive psychology onto productivity models. That sounds super duper interesting. Please tell us more about it.
Yes. So basically, I think all of human flourishing is ultimately grounded in developmental neurobiology. So, we know from psychology and from neuroscience that the way we develop as children ultimately sets us up for success or sets us up for less success that we might have to then overcome. So at the root of my work is really my core discipline, which is neuroscience. And in addition to this, because I've always been interested in human flourishing, both personally as well as professionally, I've been very interested in positive psychology because it looks for what works as opposed to what is broken. So, and particularly the sort of psychology 2.0 is even more holistic, because it says that we understand that, we may come to life with certain traumas, and we may come to life with shadows and difficulties. And that is part of, in fact, the phenomena of being human. We don't arrive spot free, and so on. And but at the same time, I think the combination I see in terms of how we help people's minds work in connection with their bodies, in connection with their understanding of their system, really gets the best of the two disciplines when they are applied to both the individual in terms of their achievement, but also in the workplace to workplace culture.
Absolutely. And it's wonderful to see how the two intersect. And I personally was very, very intrigued to learn more about this, because I did 4 years of my college. I studied psychology. And, I was just really very, very interested to understand from you, how organizational perspective can be mixed with positive psychology and what kind of results it can create. So that sounds very, very interesting.
Yes. So, I think one of the things that I say is unique about my work and Make Time Count's work is what we call the triple benefit. So we basically take a very systemic approach to our work, and we say that there's a benefit for the individual who works with us, for their surrounding team or family, and for the organization in terms of its brand and its sustainability. So we always design our interventions with this triple benefit.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. So I have a follow-up question on that. So you've mentioned that you've developed a grid work-life balance tool that you apply this concept to. So can you tell us a bit more about it in detail?
Of course. So, when I ran and developed a productivity model, it was a model based on heart and mind connection. And in fact, when I was giving lectures about it in the business school, and I shared it with the NASA senior team in leadership, at the heart of this model was the heart. So this idea that, we really are ultimately human, we're not machines. It's very different. And using this approach in my long-term study of talent, which I did at Imperial College London, I could see that people did very well. They did superbly well. And that was very nice. But nonetheless, it was very clear that some people would still suffer and burn out. And this made me really start to ask the question for myself about how come. And that's how GRID was born, because GRID has really started from the idea that we have to balance work and life, and that, this conversation about work-life balance has been going on for quite some time, probably good 20, 30 years in research already, impinging on burnout. But what I sort of think I added to this equation is the idea that actually, if we simply focus on work and life, we will always get it wrong. And that's a really strong statement, but I'm really happy to put myself behind it. And I think the two other variables that are so important to manage within this equation is self-care and career. And I have seen that, whether you are a young student, whether you are, on your first job, whether you're a middle executive in a company, these questions about learning the habits of learning how you self-care, the habits of career management, if you don't get them right, they are like the hidden iceberg that start to kind of sabotage what happens to you at work and what happens to you in your family. And that means that everything starts to fall down. And, even HR policies and processes often don't include conversations about career. And if people are, neurologically speaking, that means that people are very unsafe because people are always worried about what's going to happen next, and their nervous system is worried no matter what. And it creates a dilemma that raises a lot of anxiety, creates burnout. And so the grid is really simple. It's a 2x2 matrix that simply says that you can do far better if you try to approach your general life by paying attention to these 4 quadrants. So it's really simple. You pay attention to your personal life, to your self-care, to what you do at work, so how you make your living, and then or if you're a student, how you study, because I work also with students, we run programs for students. And then you also consider your career management. So you really start to look at that, because it's a very important variable in terms of keeping our safety. And so when you do those 4 together, if you are an individual who does this, you develop more focus, you are far more grounded, you have this stability. But also in an organization, we have organizations here in the UK that are adopting this approach for their coaching academies, for their HR, so that they're able to have their staff be far more healthy, far more engaged, and far more productive. So the book was really like my my sort of attempt to put in the hands of every person a little manual. It's a very practical book. It's not something amazing, but it's very practical. It's 3 months process. So you can say, okay, look, start this way, take an initial temperature of where you are at, do this, learn this process, and then 3 months later, you will be much better. So that was the original book. I'm now working on a much more larger book, based on this, of course. But I'm really pleased that the first one is done well in this space, because it actually gives people a practical tool.
Absolutely. And no doubt it's done well, because a lot of people at some point in time have been students. A lot of people are working professionals right now. I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this and watching this right now are probably juggling both things at once. So what you've just spoken about is definitely going to be very helpful to us. And that's not just because, it's a very solid concept in itself, but also talks about mental health have certainly increased with the pandemic. So I feel like people are becoming more and more aware of what it takes to actually be productive while being in a pandemic. So what you just mentioned is definitely going to be very helpful for all of us.
I hope so. And it so far looks that way, yes. Because, the number of different hats, as you say, for most people is increasing. And the more we have to do, the more we are coming up against the pressures of how to fit it all, how to prioritize it all, how to make progress across these different dimensions. And Grid gives you a framework and a tool to do it.
Yes, and that's what we need at the end of the day. Just a framework that can tell us that, if you follow this, you will be able to do it. So just to go ahead with it. So that's absolutely wonderful. I feel like you're doing great work for all of us out there.
Thank you. That's really lovely to hear.
So at leadershum, we're all about enriching the lives of people interested in taking a proactive role towards personal leadership and productivity to cultivate better lives. And that's a motto that's been shared by you as well. And the 3 books that you've written that we just spoke about are a testament to that thought. So we'd love to learn more about your books. And also, if you could tell our viewers and listeners where we could find them, that would be great.
So you can find all my books the easiest way on Amazon. Our Amazon friend, of course, and you can also find them at my website at maketimecount.com. And the 3 books are Get Productive, which was my initial approach to holistic productivity, where I basically recognized, just by observing from the work I was doing with individuals and groups, that productivity is more than just getting stuff done and doing more. And it's to do a lot more with things we don't often directly say is productivity, like knowing what our values are, knowing what are our personal priorities, knowing how to be in relationship with other people, which is, if you cannot do this, you cannot be productive in life, okay? That's really key.
That's true.
Yes, and so I have decided on a book that I wanted to write that would be still valid a decade later. I wanted to try to write a classic. And I think that so far this book, was published 5 years ago, and I still get lovely reviews and people love the book, which to me is a sign of success. It's been translated into 2 different languages. It went into Chinese and Arabic. So I'm hoping it can be translated again and perhaps updated. So that was my first book. And then Get Productive Grid, I linked to that because it's still about productivity, but it's about balance and well-being and finding a tool to help you really focus and start tracking and learning. So I am, an educator in my heart, and I do feel that we can do a lot in self-coaching and raising our self-awareness. And because the grid is a visual method, it literally shows you what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right. So it allows you to improve right away. And then my most recent book, which is called Body Talk, really took a much deeper dive into what I see a lot in my clinic with people, which is dissociation and disconnection. So as people suffer more because of anxiety, because of stress, because of burnout, they literally dissociate from their bodies. They are not there. They are becoming machines. And there is so much body wisdom that I felt both from my personal practice that this was something very useful to invite people into to be better humans. And so I took a detour and went to write that book first. And those are my 3 books. And I'm currently working on the productivity model that I was originally teaching to NASA as a book, because it's a fantastic book, which I believe now can fit with the work of philosophers and people around the world as we try to start to see the impact of the pandemic and the need for human-centered approaches and more compassion and more ways of working in this related systemic way. So I'm coming back to my initial model now again, even though it was a chapter in Get Productive. So Get Productive chapter 4 is pretty much this work, but I'm going to bring it to life now.
Absolutely. And the fact that you're circling back to it in your next book is a testament to the idea that it's a very good concept that is timeless, and it's going to help everyone.
I do believe it's a great concept, but I only write books that I practice. And if I'm really honest, I think Get Productive Wheel is something you can find from the Imperial Business School lecture. It's already online. So, I have shared it with the world. I've been teaching about 2,500 coaches in the UK this model. They love it. Some people come back to me and say, can you publish it? Where is it? Can we use it? But I have not been able to fully embrace it myself in terms of real integrated practice, because my own journey was more towards needing to balance and needing to address burnout. And so I follow my own process. And now I feel it's a book I can really own and write about as a leader.
Absolutely. They say practice what you preach, but what we get to see here is preach what you practice. And I feel like that's so wonderful, because as a leader, you have that influential capacity over people, and that's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
So moving on, when we qualify people as a resource, and this is something that we shortly just spoke about a while ago, we tend to shift to the lens and stop looking at them as humans. So how can we then mindfully manage productivity and output without overlooking their health and well-being?
Well, I think your question, begs an answer, doesn't it? So, I am very inspired by art. I think I trained as a scientist, but, in another life, I would be an artist. And I think your question could be asked another way. Imagine looking at a painting, and instead of stepping back and looking at a whole Picasso or a Matisse, you focus on just one little tiny part. And this is all you ever see. I think it's the same when we start from a place of focusing on resource in the human, instead of, the human who also has a resource. And I think it's basically getting this view a little bit wrong, that is always going to miss the best of humanity, and it creates problems that I have seen. Problems about, difficulty relating, problems with performance, problems with motivation, problems with conflict in families, in the workplace, which then means we have to create solutions to solve a problem that if we would solve at the root level, we wouldn't have. So it's bad engineering. And I am committed to, finding ways to help people understand that it can be different, it can be better. I know that it's never going to be utopia, and I'm not, foolish to assume this, but I think there are many problems that create suffering that are completely preventable. And this would be one of them. People do want to work, people do want to do a good job, and we have to learn ways in which we can help them do so.
Absolutely. So let's say we are talking about people within the leadership role, and it becomes really difficult for them to sometimes overlook the line that is there between people working as a resource and people as humans. So if you had to just give them one advice, what would it be? What could they do to make it better for themselves and others around them?
I think if I could only give people one tip, I would say that you should always switch shoes.
Yes.
I think when the concept of, empathy and compassion, as opposed to, which is a heart-based concept, as opposed to mind-led judgment, means that if I look at you from my place, I can only evaluate you and judge you in relation to me.
Absolutely.
But in fact, if I do that, I miss you completely. I am evaluating myself, I'm projecting myself, and that is all. And the relatedness is lost. So I would say, and it's what I teach, some of my leaders that I coach, and I will say, what if I put you in this chair and you look at this from this person's perspective? And, the questions that come up are so different. They say, oh, this person is a father, and I think his father is really ill. Maybe this is why. And the mind opens possibilities, and then you can say, well, that's why you can go and ask, and you can test your ideas, with the other person, and you can focus on the common link, which is the things you share, because all people want to do well. It's some, most of us don't really set out in the morning to have a bad day.
Absolutely. And
so yeah,
to see, how much empathy and compassion, how much of a difference it can make. So I feel like it should be a more regular practice than it already is, that it should be done more consciously.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
And now coming to the last question for today's interview, do you have any passing remarks for us?
Well, as we were discussing this earlier, so your having this interview made me, of course, reflect and think. And being that I care a lot about education, and I use education a lot in my work, I really think that education and workplace are intimately linked. And I am going to be inspired by your interview to write a piece about it for LinkedIn. As far as I think that when we, the purpose of schooling at every level is to prepare us for life and for work, is it not? Yeah. We are supposed to develop knowledge and skills to thrive in the workplace. But current education is actually based on our understanding of the workplace in which human beings are resources. Yes. Which means that much of education is still focused around judgment, is still focused around competition, and is still focused around who's the best. And if you're not the best, you are a loser. And this is I think recapitulated in the workplace as well. It's always about curves and performance curves, and the outperformers and the alphas and the betas and the not so good ones. And the idea of effective, smart talent management is not to make some people feel bad that they are bad performers. It's to find a way to use them in your business so they can be shining with the skills they do have. And this is about, I think, really clever engineering when it comes to human-centered ways of being able to work with people to achieve missions. And when that's done very well, we get the best of both worlds. So I sort of began to think that there probably is a reason why I want grit to be adopted in schools, because I think if we develop young people who are starting to learn based around balance and self concept of identity that is healthy, that is not just work-based. We develop human beings that are great family members and community members, and people who can then also be great leaders. And there's a reason why many leadership programs include community-based projects, because we are trying to teach leaders how to lead this way, but we are almost trying to fix it. And I don't think we have to. So that's my parting message is, if you're a mom, dad, grandpa, focus on balance, and balance is key. I think it's the key principle to everything, all health, and I say this even as a neurobiologist, because when we have balance, we don't have cancers.
Absolutely. And that is so important, because most of our school life is linked to who we become as adults and how we function at the workplace, and having the right approach to it since the very beginning can definitely help us go a long way, and maybe even cultivate better leaders. That's absolutely wonderful. And I don't think we could have ended that interview on a better note than that. So thank you so much, Magdalena. It was a wonderful conversation, and we're so glad that you took out the time to talk to us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel very honored, and also as a woman leader, very honored to be part of your platform. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. The pleasure was all ours. Have a great day ahead.
You too. Take care.